Today's episode is all about ankle injuries in hockey players, a really common problem accounting for sometimes about 30% of total injuries. So a really common problem and one that we can look to solve with a few easy solutions. So to begin with, it accounts for sometimes about a third of total injuries. This has been reported in a number of different injury audits across hockey competition and performance at various different levels. The reason why this happens so much is because of the unplanned change of direction. The surface can be sometimes variable, and if the surface isn't too good, then sometimes you can get players slipping, for example. Also, you get a range of different footwear. Sometimes the footwear is not appropriate. You can also get that. And there's a lot of change of direction and sort of unplanned sudden decelerations as well. And a lot of these things lead to the most common mechanism, which is an ankle eversion injury or inversion injury. So a rolling of the ankle effectively. So there's a few things we can do to solve this from a strength training perspective, from a mobility perspective, and also from a kind of balance, proprioception and technique perspective as well. So the four key areas we can look to implement in order to reduce the frequency of ankle injuries are calf capacity, tibialis anterior strength, balance and proprioception, and dorsiflexion range of motion. So starting with the first one, calf capacity, the reason why this is important is because the more a muscle can tolerate in terms of workload, the less likely it is to fatigue and therefore to put the joint at risk. Now, the calf plays a big role in the stability of the ankle in particular, and when it comes to inversion, eversion, it plays a role in that stability as well as being able to accept and tolerate loading through the ankle. So if it's more fatigued, you put the ankle at a greater risk of injury. A good sort of ballpark figure to aim for this is about 25 calf raises, and we do that as a 1 second up, 1 second down test to a metronome, and above 25 would be generally regarded as a good sort of threshold, and 30 and above would be excellent. So if for example you're at 15 reps, then probably suggest that you could look to include a few more sort of calf raises into your program in order to bump those scores up. The second one then is anterior or tibialis anterior strength. There's a research study around this, which I'll link in the description below, which is all about how the link between tibialis anterior strength and rates of ankle injuries was correlated. So in other words, players with stronger tibialis anterior, which is the muscle responsible for dorsiflexing the ankle or pulling the toes towards the shin, reduce the rate of ankle injuries in the sport. So if we can increase that, hopefully we can start to reduce the frequency of injury. And again, that's not to say that it's causative, but it is a correlation. So players with stronger tibialis anterior muscles had reduced rates of ankle injuries. That kind of makes sense again because it has an important role eccentrically when the ankle is plantar flexing, and when it's going through some kind of inversion, eversion, again, it's going to help to attenuate those forces and provide more stability. The third one is dorsiflexion range of motion. So if you have really good range of motion, you're going to be able to tolerate greater ranges, clearly, but also not put the ankle as much risk if you get into a compromised position, which can happen when you're in low positions or you're having to suddenly change direction quickly. On that, the reason for it is that stress, the amount of stress that a joint or muscle experiences, is related to the cross-sectional area over which it's applied. So if you were to, for example, have a very limited dorsiflexion range of motion, then there's going to be a lot of stress in the ankle joint because there's not a lot of range of motion for that force to be distributed across. Whereas if you've got really good range of motion, say between 10 to 15 centimeters on a knee to wall test, then that's going to help to attenuate some of those forces and distribute the loading across the ankle joint more effectively. Also, sometimes the ankle will invert to create range if there's none in dorsiflexion. So it's a really effective way to address that problem. Again, from an ankle injury perspective, the more range of motion through the ankle, the less likely it's going to go into an inversion or eversion in order to find range, because the ankle or all joints will try and find the path of least resistance. So the more effectively we can create good range of motion, the better that's going to be from an injury prevention perspective. The final one then is performing balance and proprioception exercises. So things like hops, single leg balance with your eyes open and eyes closed, moving whilst also balancing as well is really effective. Again, the reason for this is the proprioceptors at the ankle joint and all joints tell the body where the joint is in relation to space. So if it, for example, can effectively do that and you've got really good proprioception at the ankle, you're going to be able to get your ankle into good effective positions much more effectively than if you don't know that, because either you've had previous ankle injuries, maybe some damage to the proprioceptive capabilities of the ankle, or simply you just haven't got good enough balance, which in effect means you can't then get the ankle into good positions effectively. So in summary, if you can increase the strength of your tibialis anterior, increase the capacity of the calf, gastrocnemius, increase the range of motion at the ankle through dorsiflexion range, and provide more stability as well as proprioception at the ankle joint, you can be really, really effectively able to tolerate some of these stresses that hockey places on the body and hopefully reduce the risk of injury overall. So I hope that's been a really useful overview of ankle injuries and the things we can do to prevent that. And then down below, there's a strength training link to a strength training article around ankle injury prevention, as well as our free strength training guide, which includes how to effectively prepare for strength training for hockey.